quick just advertisement for FSU, Florida State University, and in your packets we have our industry flyer for social and sustainable business. Actually, we created it 3 years ago, and when I went to my dean and said I want to start a master's degree in ESG, she said, great. We went to the races, and we ended up calling it Social and Sustainable Enterprises because nobody knew what it was. So we're looking for industry partners. I have great students, rising stars like Sally, who are learning all about ESG, and they're going to be ready to go on day one. So as Donovan mentioned, Sally and I have done a lot of research. A lot of you have participated in that research, really trying to find out, how are companies reporting, what are the best practices, and different things like that. Sally is, as you heard in the introduction, she's a grad student in the program. She's done a lot of the heavy lifting on this research. I asked her to come down because she is a rising star, and a lot of what you're going to see today, she produced. And I'm going to make little Ed McMahon quips on her research, and we'll go from there. But today we're going to look at a couple of different things. We're going to look at how companies are compiling ESG data. We're also going to look at why companies are reporting ESG data, which ESG frameworks companies are using, and what are the most challenging aspects of ESG reporting. And before we get into the data, though, I want to thank Andy and just really taking it back to, we talk about all this research and this data, and all of that's really, really important. But I want to take you back to, really, ESG should be spelled F-A-M-I-L-Y, right? It should be called family. And I started my ESG journey over 2 decades ago. I was in the coffee business. It's one of the dirtiest businesses out there. And I was visiting one of the farmers, and I was picking some beans. And I was picking beans next to a little girl, and I was just talking to her and just spending the day, just kind of learning about the farm and things like that. She's about 8 years old. And I noticed some children that were going to school. And as they were going to school, I asked her, I said, well, why are you in the fields with me? Like, why aren't you going to school? And she said, my family can't afford me to go to school. I have to work in the fields so we can eat. And I was going to dinner that night with that family. And I remember sitting there thinking, I charge people $6, $7 for a latte for the beans that this little girl's picking. And we can do better than this. We can do better. We can treat their better, because that family loves their daughter as much as I love my daughter. And I just want to thank Andy for bringing it back home, because what we're sharing is data, and we're going to make this data available to you if you want it. But it really is not about ESG. It's about F-A-M-I-L-Y. Great. And then we're going to talk about some key takeaways of our research. So, Sally?
Thank you for the introduction, Mark, and thank you, Benchmark, for the opportunity to be here today to share some of our research. So the first data point we are going to discuss is how companies are managing their ESG data. So if you just recently embarked on your ESG journey, or your company is still in the process of defining its ESG metrics and goals, you may be using some manual workflows, maybe some spreadsheets, to be able to track all of your ESG data. Well, if that is the case, you are not alone, as more than half of our survey respondents are currently using spreadsheets to manage their ESG and sustainability data.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me in the early 90s when I had my first company, and we used to do our books by hand, debits and credits and going down and everything. And then I don't even remember what the software was called, but let's call it QuickBooks came out. And we were kind of deathly afraid of what's this computer thing? And so we did double management for a while. And we started seeing discrepancies. And when we would look down into it, we're like, oh, wow, doing it by hand is really dumb. This computer thing might stick. So I kind of look at where we're at right now. And 2 nights ago, I was having dinner with a company that has revenue over $20 billion a year. and we were talking about ESG, and I said, well, how are you measuring? Like, how are you reporting? How are you gathering data? They're like, spreadsheets. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, this is, I guess, 2022, right? You have 3 years of COVID to figure this out, like what's going on? And this is like, so you're not alone if you're using spreadsheets, but I can tell you there's a better way. And there's a lot of much better way, And if you're not doing, your accounting by hand, you really probably shouldn't be doing your reporting by hand either, or by Excel spreadsheets. The next data point that Sally's gonna talk is why companies are producing ESG reports.
So when we asked companies why they produce an ESG report, 35% of respondents came back saying that they did so to be a better corporate citizen. This was actually a surprising data point for us. We had thought that the majority of companies produce an ESG report in order to meet shareholder or financial institution requirements.
Yeah, it was surprising. And one thing that we looked at was, well, when you kind of combine the financial institutions and shareholder requirements, you're closer to 48% is what we were kind of expecting. Because, the pressure, as Andy alluded to, the SEC, but financial institutions, insurance, and stakeholder requirements are really pushing companies to do this. And I'm not really confident in this 35% of being better corporate citizens. Maybe the people that took the survey want that, but I'm not sure about the C-suite people. But that's the data that we came up with. Sally's now going to talk about just frameworks. This is actually really interesting.
It is. So over the first 2 to 3 months of our survey, GRI was the most used reporting framework. I think there were 75% of all respondents had been using GRI. However, as you can see here, in the final data collected as of this past week, there's parity between GRI, CDP, TCFD, and SASB.
Yeah, and just to let you know, we sent this survey out to over 700 ESG directors, or whatever they want to call themselves, and to take this survey in it. And our population result was we're a little bit over 100 respondents, and it was really interesting to see, like right out of the gate, GRI was still far ahead, and that's what I kind of expected. And then just as we went along, there was some news and different things that are happening, and just seeing the parity. And I think this is a big movement in the industry that we all want to see convergence. And it was really cool, actually. We were talking with Matthew, who's going to be up here in a little bit from GRI. And one of the really great things that are happening, I'm hoping I'm not stealing your thunder, but board members of all of these different frameworks are talking to each other. Imagine that. And talking about standards and bringing convergence together. And I think it's going to make it a lot more simple and a lot more clear for us who are trying to do honest reporting. And then finally, Sally's going to talk about the 3 challenges.
Yeah, so we asked all of our survey respondents to identify the most challenging aspects of ESG reporting. The most common response was data management.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not surprising if you're using spreadsheets, if you're a global company or just a big United States-based company or something like that. Just how do you get that data if you're using spreadsheets? Who's putting in the numbers? Does it make any sense? And things like that. So that was expected. I'm actually surprised that it's that low, 30%, but that's what came out.
And then the second most challenging aspect was distributed responsibilities. So, of course, ESG teams can typically be made up by just a handful of people pulling information across all departments. So you could see how that would be an issue. Yeah,
and that's what, and just speaking with a lot of you folks and ESG directors, a lot of these departments are a department of one, right? But that one person has to get this data from all of these different people. So having some sort of system that there's distributed responsibilities is a major challenge. And I guess, software companies like Benchmark, are solving those challenges. And the final one?
Yeah, and that's a good lead into our final, which is a lot of companies had difficulty finding an adequate software solution that can help them track their ESG data.
Yeah, and I get this. I was talking with a global company a couple of months ago who's using spreadsheets, and they know it's inadequate, they know it doesn't work, but they don't know where to go, right? They don't know what software solution to go to. So there's kind of this, they're paralyzed by like, this is how we've always done it. And we do that a lot in academia, but you know, if you're a global company, maybe that's not the best way to do it. Just ask Blockbuster, and you know, and it's like, okay, you know what? Those who evolve, you know, this is, as Andy said, is not going away, right? And this is not a trend. This is the cost of doing business in the 21st century. So just some, just a recap, some key takeaways from the survey that we did. Was if you're, you know, this is our just personal takeaway. If your company's using spreadsheets to track ESG, it's time to invest in some software, people. You got to evolve. It's not going to work. The SEC, financial institutions, and stakeholders are going to demand financial grade data, right? It's just the days of greenwashing. You're gonna get burned, and it's over. And there's real risk in climate change. There's real risk in social issues. Just ask Nike, right? And you got to have financial grade ESG reporting. Also, we believe standardization of ESG reporting is coming. We think the SEC's announcement is a great step in the right direction. You know, we'll see about the scope 3 and all that. But standardization, we hope, is coming. And that's basically it. Thank you very much. You know, Sally, her email is right there, sally@mcneesegroup.com, and I'm Mark, and if you would like to get the full survey results, or if you'd like to take the survey, just email one of us and we will get that to you. If you would like to partner with Florida State University as an institution, we would love to have you. Again, the flyer is in your bag, and just thank you so much for giving us the time.